Christmas came early this year. Why? Well, because my gym got a brand new board, the 2024 MoonBoard. So, as an aspiring board lord, I thought it would be cool to give an unbiased, honest review of the 2024 MoonBoard and compare it to some of the other boards that I have already climbed on in the past. So for context, I have previously climbed on the Kilter board, the 2016 MoonBoard, and both the Tension Board 1 and Tension Board 2. Before ever climbing on the 2024, my max grade on the 2016 was around low-end V10. So first, I'd like to talk about the pros of the 2024 and some things that I think are good when compared to the other boards that I've climbed on. So first, and probably most important, are the holds. I think compared to the 2016, at least in my opinion, the holds are quite a big upgrade for two reasons mostly. One, the variety of the holds I think are way better than the 2016. The 2016, even though I very much enjoy climbing on it, kind of has like basically one hold type, and that's like a half crimp pinch. And there's also some other very heinous pockets and monos that I think most people tend to avoid. And so you get a very specific style of climbing. Whereas on the 2024, there are now a lot more fat pinches and skinny pinches, as well as both flat and in-cut crimps, as well as having some actual pretty comfortable pockets that don't feel nearly as tweaky or injury prone as the 2016 pockets. I also think the holds are quite a bit more comfortable than the 2016, and it makes me want to try harder for longer because the holds are a lot more ergonomic and it lends itself to a much more comfortable style of training and board climbing. I also really enjoy the mix between plastic and wooden holds. I've seen some complaints about the fact that the wood holds still have a bit of texture, and I will admit that the wooden holds are not as comfortable as the tension board wooden holds, but personally I have not had any skin issues while climbing on the 2024, and the plastic and wood is much less abrasive than the 2016, so that is another plus. Secondly, I think that the 2024 is significantly less tweaky, at least on your fingers, than the 2016. The MoonBoard is pretty notorious for being very tweaky, especially in terms of finger injuries. And I think if there's a single person that has been responsible for the most number of blown pulleys, it would probably be Ben Moon. And I think the 2024 is definitely a lot more forgiving in terms of being a little bit more kind to your fingers. Another thing that I'm really glad to see change are the pretty stupid rules that were in place on the MoonBoard before. For example, you used to not be able to set starting holds that were above the 6th row, which obviously limits your options quite a bit compared to a lot of other boards. And another rule that used to be a thing is every boulder needed to be a proper sit start, which was fine for some boulders, but I think a lot of the ones that especially were starting on the 6th row, it made it almost impossible to start some of these problems in a proper sit start if you were shorter, like myself. And this made me sometimes even want a pad stack for the MoonBoard, which sounds absolutely ridiculous because it is. And I'm really glad to see that that rule is no longer in place. Another positive of the 2024 MoonBoard is, so far at least, I think the grading has been quite a bit more consistent than the 2016. I would say that the difficulty on average is about the same, if not probably a little bit softer than the 2016, but the variance is definitely way down. The 2016, especially with how much variation are in the yellow holds, some of the V9s felt like hard 8s, and some of them felt like V11 plus to me. So I'm really happy to see the grading to be a little bit more consistent. So just to give some visual intuition, I made this graph here where the middle of each picture is like the average grade, I think, in terms of how soft or sandbagged it is. And then how tall it is kind of like the variation. And so far, I think the 2024 MoonBoard goes around like maybe here or so, something like that. Board grading probably deserves its own video though, especially when taking into account hold variation, conditions, and angle changes. I think the difficulty can vary even more than what is depicted here. Alright, so moving on to the bad. I think the biggest gripe that I have with the 2024 is honestly the same one that I have on the other MoonBoard sets, and that is the lack of designated footholds. I think the fact that every foothold that you're going to use is also a handhold makes the requirement for good footwork kind of non-existent, or at least significantly reduced than on other boards, and especially outside. One thing that I also wish that the MoonBoard would implement is a kind of like no matching option for boulders, because a lot of the times what I will see is somebody will make this super intricate, really cool sequence where it's obviously intended not to be matching, and then they'll put it up as like a V9 or something, and then the community will try it and match on every hold, completely break the beta, and then grade it like V7. And I think it would be good to just give people the option to try to force really cool sequences using a no matching rule. Another thing that I think the 2024 could use, and this might be a little bit controversial, is some really bad holds sprinkled in that are kind of a little bit more like the yellow holds on the 2016. I definitely don't think that it needs to be a third of the entire board as is with the 2016, but I think a handful of really bad holds would give the opportunity to set something super hard without having to set these insanely huge span moves that is so often the case with really hard board climbing. Another issue I have with the MoonBoard is the app. I think compared to the other two of the big three currently, I would say that the MoonBoard app is by far the worst. It is very buggy and also super ugly in my opinion. So that is something that I would like to see improved upon going forward. Also, the new feature where you can see the beta that the setter intended doesn't really work when the majority of the setters don't really seem to be even paying attention to giving the proper beta and just putting left hand on all the holds. So that's another thing that I think could be improved upon. So another thing that I wanted to touch upon is the lighting system. So when you compare the MoonBoard's lighting system to the Tension Board 2 and especially the kilters, I think it leaves a lot to be desired, because there's a very common issue when you're right at the top of a boulder and you can't remember which hold the foot's supposed to go to, so you have to like look down and kind of struggle a bit and really try to figure out what the foothold was when you're at the top of the boulder. And that's just not a problem in some other commercial boards, especially the Kilter board, which has a really nice lighting system. Is it my fault that I'm not able to remember like the 3 moves that go into a MoonBoard problem before I pull on? Like, yeah, but I think it is nice, especially like when you're just warming up, to not have to worry about memorizing all the different holds of a problem and just be able to kind of read it as you go up. And so I think that's something that is worth considering, especially because now that the holds are on average bigger than other MoonBoard sets, it becomes even harder to see the LED lights when you're above them. So in conclusion, even though there are definitely things I think that can still be improved upon, it is overall one of my favorite boards that I've been on, and I definitely would recommend getting on it if you have the chance. I will say that if you're a diehard MoonBoarder, you might be a little bit disappointed that you won't get that pure, raw, masochistic MoonBoard feeling that you do on some of the other MoonBoard sets, but I personally really enjoy having a board that is both intense but also comfortable and ergonomic to train on. So I definitely think it is one of the best boards on the market right now. And I'm feeling a strong 7 to a light 8 on this one. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, I would really appreciate it if you considered liking and subscribing. And I'm also still super new to this, so any constructive criticism or feedback would be also greatly appreciated.